Nosferatu is the latest film from director Robert Eggers, who's known for his other subtle yet visually striking films such as The Lighthouse. This latest film is a reimagining of an earlier film adaptation of the original novel by Bram Stoker, which is Dracula. So, if you've read the novel or you watched the Francis Ford Coppola film and you're familiar with the story, you might have noticed some similarities between the original Tale of Dracula and this Nosferatu film. And by some similarities, of course, I mean they're exactly the same, except the character names have changed pretty much. And maybe some people were surprised about that. I was surprised because my only reference point for the character of Nosferatu before this was probably the episode of SpongeBob he was in.
Then who was flickering the lights? Nosferatu!
But there are some key differences, and I would say the biggest one is the kind of role of who in the original novel was called Mina Harker. In this, she's played by Lily Rose Depp, and her character is the one who is kind of in a romantic relationship with Dracula or Count Orlok, and the nature of that relationship is what's different, and kind of the motivating factors behind what they do is different. Because I read the novel a few years ago, so to my best recollection, I don't remember there being a huge focus on the kind of romantic element between Mina and Dracula. If you watch the Coppola film, that is the main focus of the film, really. It's the heart of the film, is the love story, the really melodramatic romance between Dracula and Mina Harker, and that's kind of what drives the film. But in that film, what's interesting is in the end, when she kind of gives herself over to Dracula, it's not 100% clear what it is that's motivating her, other than she's under a spell, or maybe she is the reincarnation of Dracula's wife who died, hundreds of years ago. Her as a character, we don't really get a kind of an in-depth reason why she is so enamored with him. Whereas in Nosferatu, we see at the start, she is a young girl who's feeling a bit isolated and alone, so she reaches out to this Count Orlok character, and as she gets older, she kind of regrets it and realizes it was a bad relationship and is kind of trying to get away from him. But when he comes back into town and starts causing trouble, it's up to her. And that's at the end, she kind of takes it upon herself. She gives herself up willingly, but not because she loves him, because she knows that's the only way to defeat him. So the character has a bit more agency in this, and has a bit more depth. She becomes the kind of unsuspecting hero in the end, which is a nice departure. And that nature of the relationship that I said, it's interesting because there's the theme of kind of a younger woman who gets in a relationship with an older kind of male figure who at the time seems like a good idea and provides her kind of comfort and companionship, but then she realizes how toxic it is, and when she's older and is trying to get away from her like creepy ex. It's a very, for such a stylized and heightened film, that kind of theme and that kind of story element is very grounded and down to earth, which I think is what kind of sells it. Because I think this film is what Francis Ford Coppola wishes his Dracula film was, because it has all the amazing visuals and all the heightened kind of drama elements, but it's still very grounded, still very real. Where I feel like when I watch Coppola's Dracula film, I can enjoy it on kind of a technical level, in terms of the performances and the costumes and the sets and the practical effects, but I don't think I'm ever really sucked into the kind of the story and the melodrama of it all. I don't think I ever it never really gets me.
Come to me. Come to me. Hear my call. Come to me.
I think another reason I really like this film, and a reason why it's so visually striking, is the use of blocking. So blocking is essentially the way in which you place your characters within the frame, within a certain scene. And I think it's a bit of an underappreciated or underrated kind of art form within filmmaking at the moment. Because, like most things, if you do it right, you don't really notice it. So that's not to say that people are doing blocking wrong or there's bad blocking in kind of shows and films nowadays. But I think it's just not very interesting or a little bit unimaginative. And an example I'm thinking of is I just watched Squid Games there recently, and like that, great show, one that you would, when you think of it, you associate it with uh, striking visuals and a very kind of deliberate style in terms of its costume and set pieces and stuff like that. But in terms of blocking, I'm thinking, I'm of any number of kind of scenes where there's characters talking, and no matter what the kind of stakes or occasion, it kind of leans on the traditional, like, if two characters are talking, it might be a two shot, or you might have a shot, reverse shot, or an over the shoulder, that kind of stuff, which all works. There's nothing wrong with that. But as I said, it's just not very, imaginative. In this film, in Nosferatu, there was one scene in particular that kind of made me notice it, and then there's other bits throughout, but this one's kind of stuck out. Was towards, I think, the first kind of half of the film, the character Lily Rose Depp is talking to Nicholas Hoult, and she's telling him about, or she's trying to tell him about, her relationship with Count Orlok, or the kind of trouble she's had in her past. She's trying to open up to him about this, and he is not really listening, because one of the kind of themes of the film as well is kind of repression and suppression of kind of emotion and anything that doesn't kind of fit the normal kind of societal kind of way things are. So her head, she's kind of facing this way, and her head takes up like the so her head is kind of facing this way, and it's kind of taking up the first 2/3 of the frame, and then he is taking up the kind of other third on the left hand side, and he's kind of from head and waist, and she's kind of from here. And it's interesting because it's them two talking, and we get the two characters in the same frame having their dialogue with each other, but she's in close up and he's in mid shot. And so on the one hand, it's just it's something a bit different. It's a bit more interesting to look at. But when you think about it in terms of how it's visually telling the story, because what she's doing at that point is she's trying to open up. She's kind of baring her soul to him. So as the audience, we're closer to her. We're more intimate. We're looking in her eyes. We're inches from her face. What he's doing is he's closing up. He's putting off a barrier, and he's physically put more space between us and him and her. And that's all captured within the one frame. So like that, it's something really simple that you might not even notice the first time around, but it's just a very creative use of blocking that I thought, again, just really lent itself well to the visuals of the film. And speaking as well of the visuals, one of the other amazing things is the use of light. And I seen something, it was an article or a video about the cinematographer talking about, using single light sources. And that's something that I noticed in the film as well, because practically and thematically, light is very important in this film, because practically, like that, it just creates a more dynamic image. I'm thinking of Nicholas Hoult goes into the office towards the start of the film, and he's talking to his boss, who's telling me he has to go to Transylvania, and they're backlit from this huge window in the office. So there, what we see is pretty much in silhouette, with just the kind of flicks of light that are too bright on the other side, and they're kind of bleeding over on this, and it kind of gives them an outline of light, but they're in shadow. So like that, something like that's just very visually interesting to look at. But in terms of kind of thematically, the idea of this shadow that hangs over the film, because even during the day, there's scenes throughout the film where they're in the daytime, but it's not very bright, it's not very warm, it doesn't feel nice to be out in this kind of light. It's very harsh light, or it's very white, cold light. And then when we go to, say, the inn, or we go to Count Orlok's castle, and we have fire or a candle, which is traditionally, warm, kind of cozier light, it's, that's not the feeling at all, because in the inn there's like a single candle, and fighting against all this darkness is just so oppressive. And the same in the Count's castle, where it's, even when there is a bit of warmth or a bit of light, it's fighting against this oppressive shadow that hangs over, this darkness that just covers everything. And it's like that the entire way through the film, until we get to the end, and Lily Rose Depp defeats the Count at the first, cockerel crow of the morning, and the light comes in through the window. And this is the first time in the film where the light comes in, and it's like a spring day. It's like, there's it's just nice. It just feels nice. It feels warm. It feels bright. It just feels different. It's the first time in the film where we get lighting like that, and it's after the Count is defeated. So his shadow that hung over, the film and the characters in the town is both literally and figuratively, banished. I just think it works really, really well.
Come to me.
And Count Orlok as well, his kind of the line I think the film walks between the sexuality of what he's doing, and it's just interesting because to contrast it with the Coppola film, that film was very sexualized. I think it was a very horny film, and it kind of makes sense in the context of that film. And in this, I think it pulls that back slightly to where it's not so much about the sexuality of it, but there is an element of dominance and control. And I think if you've ever watched like a serial killer documentary or a true crime podcast or anything like that, those themes of dominance, control, sexuality, and power through the means of kind of killing someone, they all kind of intermingle. The lines are all very blurred. And I think that, like that, when you see the visuals of Count Orlok kind of on someone, and he's not kind of straight up humping them, but he's kind of grinding on them slightly. But he's also, is he grinding, or is he just really getting into the sucking of the blood? But he's on top of them, and it's just, it all really sells. Again, this film marries well the kind of practical visuals of what's happening on screen in terms of what the context of the story, but also thematically of the visuals of like why things are happening. Is he on top, and is he writhing because he's just sucking in the blood because that's just a practical means of doing that, or is it because he's dominating them and he's getting a kind of a sexual kick out of this thing? It's all just very, very interesting. So yeah.
Nina!